r/AskReddit by Reddify. What's the stupidest thing a teacher ever did at school? My old English teacher ripped out a blood sugar monitor thinking it was an iPhone. Kid in my class had diabetes. As he was walking towards the student, everyone was shouting that it wasn't an iPhone. He didn't listen and ripped it out. The kid had to go to the school nurse and the teacher lost his job because of it. Update: some of you seem to think that this took place in the US. This happened in Australia. I too had a teacher do this to a student. But as far as I know, he wasn't reprimanded. Another time he yelled at a student to stand for prayer/pledge of allegiance and said, "What, are your legs broken?" Kid was in a wheelchair. I broke my leg in high school. Got surgery and had a rod inserted into the bone. So when I went back to high school I still had crutches. But no cast or anything on the leg itself. One day I was hobbling on down the hall and the vice principal stopped me and asked me if I really needed those crutches. No dude. I just think they are really fun and prefer them to using both of my legs. Side note, at the same time a little girl came up to me in the grocery store when I was on crutches and said, "I'm sorry that happened to you." Which was both weird and sweet. My chemical teacher insisted electricity wasn't invented in the American Civil War. The conversation went like this. Teach: there was no electricity in the Civil War. Class: but they had the telegraph. Right? Teach: yes. Class: and the telegraph uses electricity. Right? Teach: yep. Class: so they had electricity. Teach: there was no electricity in the Civil War. Edit: she was very clear on her stance. She claimed electricity was not invented. Yes. She used the word invented, not discovered, and nothing used electricity. Period. And humans had no idea what electricity was. Was your teacher Patrick Star? Oh boy, 3 AM. In 8th grade, a girl was known for her long hair, and which apparently was never cut in her life. Well, my math teacher at the time took some scissors and snipped some of it off for fun, and didn't think it was a big deal. Yeah. She got fired. This happened to me in the 3rd grade. My headband broke, and I was pushing my hair from my face. She jumps up with scissors and cuts my hair. Parents went to the school. I was pulled from her class. Week later she does it to another student. Her father went ballistic on her and the principal. Teacher was fired. This was 1980s in Colorado. Still makes me cry when I think about it. I'm most concerned about suddenly taking scissors near a person's face. I told the other students an easier way to do a thing mathematically. She became frustrated and told everyone my method was plausible in a classroom, but in the real world they'd be expected to do it the way she taught us. I really wish I could remember what specifically this was. But after the students realized that for every problem they came across they could use my easier method, she got frustrated with me and told me that next class I'd be teaching and she would sit in my seat. So that night I prepared a class study plan, learning techniques taught in the book ahead of where the rest of the class was, and I went in 2 days later. We had a staggered schedule, and I taught the class a new mathematical process. The teacher tried to annoy me by asking questions, but I just answered them and went on with the lecture. Before I was able to finish she became frustrated and sent me to the principal's office. When I got there, I was asked why I was there. I told them I wasn't sure and that they should ask Mrs. B. Principal came back and said I had disrespected the teacher. Honestly, I can see it. But I did do as she asked and taught her class. Teacher here. If a student challenges me in class with their own idea of how we should do something, I react the same way. Fine, you teach the class. I take their seat and let them have at it. First off, that's the most engaged they'll ever be. In front of their peers trying to communicate their own ideas. Plus the class will always pay attention to see if I get scored. See, I like that you do it as a way to keep others engaged and allow them to communicate their own ideas. My situation was deliberate in that she was trying to set me up to fail by having me teach something that we hadn't yet learned. I appreciate learning. I do my best to always pursue knowledge, and in that situation I felt like she was trying to stifle the creative process of problem solving, which is why I went balls out on making a lesson plan and preparing for any questions the students may have. At a fairly young age I realized a lot of what others consider to be harder math is just easier math when broken up into steps. So I had students refer to their text when relearning how to do a certain process, letting them know that when broken down it is a process they've known since week 3 or whenever, but this is made more complicated by adding a function like root into a linear function. I'm just using math terms I vaguely remember now. Sorry if they make no sense, but I do feel like roots in linear functions were my eureka moment in math, if I remember correctly. When I was in high school, my chemistry teacher demonstrated how electricity separates the oxygen and hydrogen atoms in water molecules. He had the complete setup and isolated the hydrogen in a fairly large glass container and capped it. Then he asked the magic question: if I was to drop a flame into this container, what would happen? A fireball. I responded. He snorted, rolled his eyes, and looked at the student, who only did well because he bought the teacher's edition of the textbook online. Wrong. Explain to a teacher your kids why. Joe I. Smart kid Joe I. Scoffed at me and flippantly said, because it needs oxygen to combust. Duh. Right. Smirked my teacher. There is no oxygen present in this container, therefore the flame will be deprived of fuel and go out. I couldn't believe their stupidity and just shook my head. Just before the fireball engulfed my teacher's face, burning off his eyebrows and causing him to throw himself backwards so hard he rolled over his lab table and fell off, dislocating his shoulder. I turned to my friend and whispered, "Gee, I wonder what the hydrogen is going to mix with the second he opens that container." And that, kids, is how this man became a legend. Some say he's still spitting fire to this day. Class trip. My GR8 teacher is known as a weird person. During a camp trip with the class, we were separated into boys/girls for obvious reasons, with our own bathrooms and shower area. During one night, while the girls were showering, my teacher, who was a 50-plus-year-old man, decided it would be a funny joke to take pictures of the girls underneath the shower doors. Tried to say he wanted them for the yearbook, and to see their surprised reactions of these candid pictures. Needless to say, big problem. But no matter how many times he'd been reported, nothing ever happened. Too many stories about this teacher that should have had legal action. From rubbing the inner thigh of a student in his car, to being balls out in a kilt and propping his leg up on a desk like Captain Morgan. What the duck? For years, everyone kept saying he was a Rexel predator, and younger grades thought it was just whatever. People talking it until you're in his class and see how it goes. I had a teacher cut their finger off with a paper guillotine while demonstrating how to safely use it. In their defense, it worked wonders as everyone was so traumatized by what could happen that no one messed around with the guillotines. Ever. I was sitting here thinking about how a guillotine made of paper could do anything to someone's hand. I really am an idiot. Me too, until I read this comment. Question on a test in elementary school: what is a shadow? My answer: an area with less light. Teacher's correction: wrong. An area with no light. This one absolutely infuriates me for some reason. Like, as you're going to mark the student wrong, wouldn't you notice that you can see the paper underneath your hand's shadow? It didn't even matter, I still got an A on the test. But it still ducking pissed me off for years. Haha. What's worse is that she was a science teacher in a bilingual school. So a lot of the kids might not have known the exact definition of shadow before, because English wasn't their first language. So she was just teaching them the wrong definition. She tried to tell us a trick to spell athlete was a T-letter. Everybody just wrote it down. I kept looking at it. That's not right, is it? I looked it up in a dictionary that I could reach and raised my hand. She got embarrassed and gave me a hard time after that, like I was showing her up. What did I do? You're the one who was telling us the wrong thing. Threw a textbook at a kid who made a joke about her mother. Killed her career. At least it wasn't the kid. Cold being two birds w/1 stone. Though. Had an affair with a 17-year-old pupil. Then left her job, husband and 3 children to go and live with him in a different city. Edit, a letter. Did you go to school with Emmanuel Macron? My teacher told me I was coloring myself in wrong. Apparently, no one has brown eyes, everyone has green or blue. I have brown eyes. I tried to tell her she was wrong, but she told me off and took my crayons, banning me from coloring from the rest of the year. I went to a small private religious school for kindergarten, and they had us draw a bird with our choice of crayons. I decided to make my bird green, and the teacher ended up being legitimately worried for my future. She told my mom, and my mom couldn't help but laugh and say, "Birds and fish can be pretty much any color, you know that, right?" Needless to say, this instance, along with the fact that they were shocked I could read at 5 years old, was one of the reasons I went to public school the rest of my schooling. As a bird enthusiast, she is dumb as duck. Many birds are green, often mixed with other colors. She probably never saw one though. I had a teacher who made us do this assignment where we would come up with an opinion on anything, and then he would argue the opposite viewpoint. After the first 3 people, it became apparent he just wanted to stroke his own ego. A man in his early 60s arguing/yelling with 13-year-olds. He was really putting people down too. One of my friends was 20th of 30 to be called on. She said, "I don't think the Holocaust should have happened." He lost his duck-eyed mind. He sent her to the office, and the assignment was over for the day. Read a chapter from the book in silence. She was a legend. How did he not see that coming? Seriously, if you've been around 13-year-olds for any amount of time, you should know what they can be. This guy was luck only one person thought of this. Also, he did not see that coming and whatnot. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.